if everyone was aware of this, but there was actually a third party / independent candidate debate last night. It was hosted on YouTube and Rumble, and also on this platform's website, I believe, as well. So there are a couple parts of this debate that I do want to cover. Unfortunately, I will tell you, not all of the candidates were present. They did say that they did invite RFK and Cornel West as well, but they did not attend the debate. I don't know why, so please don't ask me. People ask, why weren't they there? I don't know. But they were not there. They could have already had other plans. I don't know. But the candidates that were there was Jill Stein, Claudia De La Cruz. I think this is Lars Mapstead for Libertarian Party. And I think his name is Clay Smith for Libertarian Party, and Jasmine Sherman, who's also running through the Green Party as well. Before we dive into that, go ahead and smash that like button if you haven't had a chance. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. All right, let's get into this debate, because I thought this debate was actually really good. What I do not understand, though, and let me show you this part. So the debate is on NTD on YouTube, which has over 1.36 million subscribers, or actually is probably 1.36 million subscribers. And so far, this debate only has 3,316 views, which I'm very shocked by. I think maybe a lot of people just didn't know about it. I don't know, but I thought it was pretty good. We're starting out with introductions here, and I believe this is Lars Mapstead.
Care system is a total joke. It's a total sham. My insurance prices go up and up while the quality of care goes down. We all know that this is a rigged system and it has to be turned upside down. Our criminal justice system, also a total joke. We've had a 50-year war on drugs that is a complete failure. We have to stop the war on drugs, stop criminalizing people for victimless crimes, and treat people with dignity and respect and get the help that they need. What you put in your body is your choice, and the government should have no say in that whatsoever. I'm trying to unrig the system in America today because everybody's feeling the pressure, whether it's your education system, whether it's your healthcare system, like I talked about. These are all things that are suffering Americans. And I just want to make Americans feel better. The government has just completely shammed the system. And if you could go to my website, lars24.com, you can learn more about my policies to help unrig the system and make it fairer and have more integrity for America. Thank you.
Yeah, see, I'm already seeing a number of people in the chat say they didn't even know about it. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. This is where I agree with libertarians on issues like the criminal justice system. I agree with them on the drug war. I feel like what you put in your body is none of my business. So I agree with them on some issues, but not all issues. Then I think they move on to Claudia De La Cruz, which for some reason, someone starts yelling. Let me make sure I put on the cap. Oh, there's no captions. Someone's going to start yelling in the background.
Thank you. Claudia.
Thank you.
People's Party.
Thank you.
You know what I mean? And y'all cover up with the elites. You know what I mean? Jill Stein, I hope we can have a discussion. It's discussing what's happened. Right, RFK, where you at? Push me out. Go ahead. $40,000 stolen. People's Party. I'm the New York State coordinator. This is garbage. I'm leaving.
So thank you.
So I heard something about the guy say something about People's Party and you guys are just a bunch of elites. I don't know who that was, but yeah, that was interesting.
Security's taken care of. We don't allow that in the room. Claudia, please.
Thank you so much for having us. Free and Equal Foundation, Christina Tobbing for organizing this space for broad debate amongst the third-party candidates, a platform that is much necessary in the sham that is democracy in the United States. My name is Claudia De La Cruz, and I am a working class, second generation immigrant, mother, organizer, educator, and a proud socialist. I'm also a member of the Party for Socialism and Liberation, which is a party that has existed for the last 20 years, that has been in the front lines of struggle across different fronts of struggles, everything from defending our rights to housing, our rights to healthcare, against police brutality, against imperialist wars. We are actively engaged all across the country, organizing, educating, and mobilizing working class people to end the dictatorship of the billionaires, which is ultimately the root of our problem. The U.S. does not lack resources. It does not lack the ability to provide housing, create jobs, provide free health care and education for everyone in society. Instead, we have a society that produces misery, that creates 160 million people who are living in or near poverty, that produces over 500,000 people who are living in homelessness. But we have a handful of billionaires and profit makers that are benefiting from our misery and suffering, billionaires and millionaires who profit from the endless war and occupation. We need solutions that meet the scales of the problem. We cannot continue to think that we can reform capitalism. It is urgent to get the billionaire class out of power. Our Vote Socialist 2024 campaign is here to expose the brutality and organize, mobilize for the transformation of society. Vote Socialist2024.com.
Thank you, Claudia.
Okay, let me pause here. So one thing I noticed about Claudia, notice who she called out. She called out the billionaires and she called out capitalism, right? So she knows where the power is concentrated. It's concentrated at the tippity top. And she knows that that is why we have this capitalist system that is so corrupt. So that was important that she called out where the power is concentrated instead of the Republicans this, the Democrats this, the da-da-da-da. She knows where that's concentrated. So that was important. Eric just told me this actually received 93,000 views on Rumble. Okay, so it could be that YouTube suppressed it.
Yeah. Jill.
Much, and it's great to see you, Christina, again. We've been doing this for 12 years now that I've been participating in your process, and it's a tribute to you, to Free and Equal. We very much need a debate. I'm really enjoying hearing things we don't usually hear back to back next to each other. I think the American public is really desperate for, more voices and more choices. This is wonderful. My background is as a medical doctor, where I worked for decades in the clinic and became very frustrated with how our health really cannot be addressed simply after the fact in the clinic. Tried working upstream on social drivers of illness and discovered that reform is essentially stymied by the powers that be. So I moved from clinical medicine to political medicine to address the mother of all illnesses, our rigged political system that really makes change virtually impossible. So with that, I just want to note that we are in this incredible historic moment right now where the usual order of things, that of empire and oligarchy, is essentially teetering at the brink. And we are all feeling crisis in our lives, in virtually every dimension of our lives. The need for deep change has never been so urgent. But the possibility of that change has never loomed so large. And that's very much, I think, thanks to the actions of people in the listening audience, people who are here tonight, who are really standing up to fight for an end to endless war and genocide, to fight for justice in the workplace, to fight for abolishing student debt, for defending Mother Earth, and to rescue our very embattled civil liberties, which are very much under attack. We need solutions, but solutions are not permissible in the current political environment. So breaking up our zombie duopoly, our zombie political system, is essential, and I look forward to discussing some of the ways to do that tonight. Thank you.
So Jill's style was a little bit different. Notice how she brought up a little bit about her background to tell you how she actually got into this path, right? So Jill's Green Party, Claudia de la Cruz is running for the Party of Socialism and Liberation. Lars Mapstead is the Libertarian Party. And I think now we're going on to Jasmine, who's also running through the Green Party.
Jasmine.
Good evening. My name is Jasmine Sherman, and I want to get the basics out of the way. I'm fat, I'm Black, and I'm a socialist running for president of the United States. I'm not independently wealthy. I'm not invested in the stock market. I'm not living off of a trust fund set up by my rich parents. I'm not looking for a handout, and I'm not up here to make my friends wealthy or write a book. We understand that this election is a black swan event like never before.
Jasmine got all that out the way. She says she is not here to write a book.
With the Interstate Voter Compact, a third-party candidate can win. We do not have to pretend that we are trying to move parties to the left or to the right or talk about a rigged system. If you want guaranteed housing, universal health care, free education, and universal basic income, then you will vote for Jasmine Sherman. You can go to jasminesherman.com and all my policies will be read to you if you don't have time to read them yourselves. We have a chance to reset. Let's reset. We don't need to keep pretending that things need to be researched or evaluated. You know what's wrong. You don't need to hear politicians who are wealthy and are gonna go home to their nice houses and their comfortable living tell you about the problems that you experience. You know there's no food in your fridge. You know there's no money in your bank account. What you don't know is who is going to do that and resolve your issues faster. Politicians are wonderful ideas, but what you need is change. You don't need some icon. You need someone that is going to make sure that you can feed your family, educate your children, spend time with them. Right now, our country is at the precipice and we need to push it forward. If you actually want to do something, I would recommend that you listen to the candidates that have a plan to put money in your pocket tomorrow. And if you are not interested, at least begin mutual aid where you live. Go to jasminesherman.com for more details and to donate, because we have work to do.
Okay. One thing I will say I like that she did. Notice how she also represented mutual aid. She's been on the show before and she talked about mutual aid. That is something that she does participate in. But notice how she talked about her platform, her policies that she has lined out on her platform. A lot of times people talk about the problems, but we already know what the problems are. We want to hear, how are you going to fix the problems? So again, that was Jasmine Sherman, Green Party. And then I think we have Chase coming up for Libertarian.
Oh, I'm done with my time.
Thank you, Jasmine. Chase.
So thank you very much for having me here to speak with the other candidates. I imagine we're going to have a great discussion.
Oh, we can't hear you, Chase. Why did I say that as if he could hear
Chase
me?
for a moment. They cannot hear you in the mic.
Oh.
So one moment.
Can y'all hear me now?
There, we're good. Please start over, Chase.
All right. So I wanted to say thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to debate here today. I imagine many of the folks on stage are going to have a lot of agreement about the problems that face this nation. It is our solutions where we might have some differences. But my name is Chase Oliver. I want to be the Libertarian candidate for President of the United States because I know people are getting sick and tired of being sick and tired. Over 60% of voters have said they are willing to vote for a candidate who is not named Donald Trump or Joe Biden. And I think third parties and independents need to seize on this opportunity to bring new voters out, new solutions to the table. And as a libertarian, my solutions are pretty much rooted in the idea of freedom. If you are living your life in peace and you're not committing force, fraud, coercion, theft, or violence, your life is your life, your body is your body, your business is your business, and your property is your property, not the property or business of an overly abusive and intrusive government that we've seen, frankly, my entire adult life. Now, I'm 39 years old. I'm half Donald Trump's age. And that's important because my generation is a generation that has had to grow up fighting the war on terror. My generation is the generation that, as we got started in this process, the entire real estate market fell out from underneath us as big banks got bailed out and the regular guy got screwed over. And it's my generation right now that is trying to raise families all over the country with record runaway inflation that is caused by the overly abusive and intrusive and massive federal government that continues to stifle growth. I got started in politics being an anti-war advocate. I'm anti-war to the core, and that means I oppose the warfare state as it exists all over the world, and we need to bring our troops back home. We need to have our military removed from every continent and every place that is the United States of America, because the only purpose of a military is to protect us from invasion. I'm also somebody who believes in the rights of free movement of immigrants. We have an immigration crisis at our southern border, but it's not the immigrants that cause that crisis. It's the government who refuses to allow immigrants to come here and work and start their American dream just like the rest of us. And I've also been a criminal justice reform advocate. People should be on a level playing field with law enforcement and the government when they're getting their day in court, and that's not happening today due to qualified immunity and other things. Go to votechaseoliver.com to see my full platform. I'm looking forward to discussing it.
Thank you.
Chase is kind of easy on the eyes too. Listen, I remember this guy. This is the guy He actually ran for office in Georgia. He was running as a libertarian against, I think, Warnock. Was he running to get Warnock? And yes, that's where I remember this guy from. This guy actually got a lot of votes. If I remember correctly, I think this guy got like 50,000 votes. Could be more than that. I have to go back and check. But he ran in Georgia, and I was like, wow, this guy is actually getting a lot of votes, like as the libertarian, candidate here. So I remember where I know him from. Okay, now we get on to the questions.
Thank you, Chase. Question 1, immigration. Reflecting the voice of the electorate, we have curated questions directly from the public for today's debate. The first question, chosen for its relevance and the widespread concern, is from Frankie Lozada. Given the evolving tactics of drug cartels, including the use of advanced technology, underground tunnels, and the smuggling of narcotics and human trafficking through legal, that is, port of entry, what innovative approaches do you conceive to stay ahead of these criminal organizations and safeguard our borders while protecting Americans and the vulnerable populations often exploited by drug cartels for smuggling purposes? Jasmine.
One of the things that my platform does is recognize that there isn't an immigrant crisis at the border. There is destabilization that the United States of America continues to cause worldwide. What we need to do is decriminalize all substance abuse items. We need to put safe use centers in every zip code. We need to give people universal health care with dental, vision, and it must be in your zip code. You must have access. And it also should include your prescriptions and holistic care. By making sure that we go ahead and make the country easy to access, the same way it was easy to access when people were coming into Ellis Island, we would not have a border crisis. What we need to do is make sure that we provide more medical staff, treat drug issues like the chemical dependency problem and the disease that they are. Instead of us pretending that these problems are bigger and not solvable, we have the funds to do it. What we don't have is leaders willing to put doctors in every zip code. We don't have leaders who are not trying to play nice with the bad guy. And I can tell you right now, we all know who the bad guys are. We need younger leadership. We need more direction. And what we need to do is treat Americans the way they want to be treated. I understand that we have allowed our government to make us think that people are flooding our borders and allow us to think that America is under invasion, but that's not accurate. We have tons of room in this country for more people. We had tons of room when people were taking over and genociding indigenous peoples here. The way we fix this is by making sure we have universal health care, a reformed immigration system, and put money back in Americans' pockets so we're not pitted against each other like we currently are trying to do. There is space for all of us. The difference is all of us need to be working towards making this country better. So.
Again, notice how Jasmine mentioned her plans. Notice how she mentions how we can fix the problem. That'll be important as you see as we get to some of the other questions.
I'm done with my statement.
Chase.
So I think the point of your question is great. He talks about how we're digging tunnels and getting around. This is the perfect example of why we don't need a giant Berlin Wall on our southern border full of razor wire that is stealing people's property to actually build that wall. I absolutely oppose it. We need to have an Ellis Island style immigration system. You should be able to come through a port of entry, do a quick check to determine that you're not wanted for extradition or something to that nature, and then come right in here and get to work, because there are jobs that need to be filled. There are people who are willing to do that jobs, and we need to quit getting government in the way of those people. If you look at the number of businesses that are created by native-born or first-generation immigrants, or the amount of people in the Fortune 500 companies, immigrants actually improve our economy. They increase the economic pie for all of us. So I want to get government out of the way of immigration. But you're talking about defunding cartels. The best way to do that is to completely eliminate the war on drugs and remove the profit motive for cartels south of our border. We want to talk about getting rid of human trafficking. Well, if we allow people to come through ports of entry very easily using this Ellis Island model, we'd be able to put our law enforcement focus on those people practicing human trafficking. Let the 99.9% of peaceful people in, and let that small sliver of human traffickers being taken down by law enforcement. Now, I do want to say this. We see in the media all the time attacking immigrants. They're going to take our jobs. They're going to dilute our culture. They're going to harm our country. Those are the exact same slanders that were thrown against our immigrant forefathers who came here through Ellis Island. They came here from Germany and from Ireland and from Italy and all over Europe. And now they're coming from the south of the border and everywhere else. We should be welcoming them here. They are the next generation of Americans that can be the next generation of American entrepreneurs, business owners, people who create jobs, people who create prosperity. But as long as we keep government in the way of this process, it stifles that growth. So I'm somebody who believes in, I don't believe in the scare tactics of immigrants. I live near them, I go to church with them, and frankly, it's ridiculous to me that anybody would try to stop good, hardworking people from wanting to come into our country and start their American dream the same way 40% of our country did. 40% of our people can trace their roots right back to Ellis Island. We need to return that process to the United States and get government out of the way.
Thank you.
Didn't touch on the foreign policy issue, in my opinion, as to why these things are happening. But he did mention solutions.
Claudia?
Well, I reject the premise of the question. The premise of the question is that immigrants are criminals, and immigrants are workers that have been displaced by wars, sanctions, and climate crisis that U.S. capitalism, U.S. imperialism has accelerated and created in those countries. It is very interesting that today marks the 20-year anniversary of the U.S.-backed coup in Haiti, for example. It is very important for us to understand what the United States did and continues to do in places like Haiti. The United States has stolen the ability for the socialist project of Cuba to develop itself, stealing from its economy $15 million a day, close to $160 billion for over 60 years. That strangles the economy of a country. It moves and forces people to leave following the traces of the things that have been stolen from them. And so if we want to be able to mitigate the immigration crisis, which happens to be a crisis now, but it wasn't an immigration crisis when the European settlers that came into this nation and displaced the indigenous people, that wasn't an immigration crisis, but so far it happens to be now because it's also racialized and it's also gendered. And so when we think about immigration, we need to think about foreign policy and the ways in which the United States has, through its imperialist mechanisms, displaced people. 60 million people across the world are moving because of war, sanctions, and climate change. We want to change that. We want to protect the borders. The best thing we could do is get out of other people's nations. Our socialist solution is building foreign policy that is built in collaboration, that is built in bringing back the troops, closing the 800 military bases all across the globe, shutting down NATO, shutting down AFRICOM, the Southern Command, and actually putting those soldiers that are out there doing the bidding of capitalism in this country to do meaningful work.
There it is once again. So Claudia also delivered solutions, but she got to the root cause of the problem, which I don't see oftentimes when people are having discussions about immigration. Let's move on.
Lars.
Thank you so much. I love that you framed it in the form of the cartels, because this is the problem that I see in America today. Prohibition doesn't work. We had prohibition in the 30s around alcohol. And what did that create? That created Al Capone. Okay? The government creates monopolies in crime when they prohibit things. And they
I honestly was going to say it created speakeasies, but he has a point.
have created a monopoly for the cartels. And if you're in business, what do you do when you're in business? You try to increase your sales and your production. So the cartels are in the business of selling drugs, and they are pushing drugs on Americans. I believe that the 50-year failed war on drugs has created more drug users than it has stopped. It's time to end this failure. Throwing some more people in jail and spending some more money on the problem is not going to fix the problem. We have to deschedule drugs at the federal level and end the cartels altogether. This is going to solve a big part of the problem at our southern border. We have chaos at our southern border because of the federal government's policies at the southern border. The cartels are disrupting the people south of the border, and they're fleeing the violence and crime that comes with the cartels. So by eliminating them, we can get rid of a lot of the problem. But there's still chaos at the border. So what we need to do is we need to streamline the system so that people can come here easily, find work easily, and be legal in this country. just like my ancestors were able to try to come and find the American dream. And I agree with Claudia, we need to stop the imperialism in America. We need to stop projecting ourselves all over the world. We need to close down those 800 bases that she was talking about. And what we could do is we could use that money to create an energy race that would lower the cost of energy across America, and not only that, would lower the cost of energy across the world, and that would start lifting people up all over the world without America spending any more money.
Let me just pause here for a second, and I have to say this, you guys. This is what a debate is supposed to be like. Debates are not supposed to be candidates screaming over each other and calling people names like we've seen in the past couple of years. This is a civilized debate. This is really what it's supposed to be like, where you can actually hear people responding and people aren't shouting over each other. I thought this was very well organized. Like, I really do. I think this is the one I was supposed to be a part of. I forget, but I was asked to moderate a debate in New York City around that same timeline. I'm thinking this is the same one, but I couldn't do it because of the date. But yeah, Larry actually asked me to do that, but the date was a conflict for me. But this is what debates are supposed to be like. What we've had in the past couple of years has been chaotic. Okie doke, next question.
Thank you. Jill.
Many points of agreement here. I completely agree this crisis of immigration is a crisis that has been created really by the United States of America through our foreign policy, through our economic domination, and through climate change, where we have been the major contributor to the destabilization of the climate. And on the issue of economic destabilization, consider, for example, the number of immigrants that have come from Guatemala. Well, where did that originate? You know, that was about doing a favor for United Fruit and overthrowing the democratically elected government of Guatemala, but way back in the 1950s, in order to prevent redistribution of land so that poor people and peasants would have a means of survival, basically. And that model has been repeated over and over again. It's been documented, for example, that the U.S. has conducted regime change, largely covertly through the CIA, approximately 70 times since the Second World War. That doesn't even include the wars that we have conducted, which are, of course, another source of really drastic destabilization and the source of migrants. And it's worth, reminding people that this foreign policy based on economic domination, it has a name. It's called full spectrum dominance. It says the quiet part out loud, that the United States specifically through its military and the Pentagon has declared that we will dominate all regions of the globe at all times in all spheres of potential conflict. And we assert that power. We are asserting that power right now in the Middle East, where Israel was long ago declared the unsinkable battleship for the United States, essentially safeguarding access to oil, which way back when we needed that oil. Now we don't need that oil, but we still want to basically control that oil. So this is about reforming U.S. policy and ending the spigot that's driving this migration crisis.
So one of the things, again, that I would add is I think it would have been helpful if she did what like Claudia and Jasmine did, where they brought out more like what would they do, more the solutions, like what would they do to fix that problem. I do want to go ahead and answer this question because I don't want to. Yeah, gamer. Yes. So they did. So Larry Sharp had reached out to me privately and asked me to moderate. It was like a third party independent debate. Originally, if I remember correctly, it was scheduled for Tuesday, and I can't do Tuesdays. Tuesdays are really hard for me. So I wasn't going to be able to get to New York to do it on a Tuesday. But I think later on the date may have had to change anyway. But I think this is the same one because it's New York and it was the same week that he asked me to do it. But so far, I really like the way that this is moderated. I like the way that this debate is flowing. It just seems so much more organized.
Thank you so much. Any rebuttals? Excuse me. Any rebuttals before we move on to the next question?
I would just like to say that all of America is tired of watching moms and babies crawl under barbed wire at the southern border. We're tired of seeing children separated from their families. As a parent, that devastates me. And we can do better, America. We can do better. We need to end the chaos at the border.
Great. Let's move on to question 2. In your opening statement, Chase, and this one starts with you by random lot, but you did mention that criminal justice reform was an important part of your agenda. There's a growing movement against what some call the prison industrial complex. America has many more people in prisons and jails per capita than every country in the world except China. Do you think there's a crime wave? And how would you rethink our criminal laws and penalties for the 21st century? What steps would you take to ensure that prisons are more focused on rehabilitation? Take it where you may.
No, I don't think we're in the middle of a crime wave. I actually think we're in the middle of an over-criminalization wave. We have far too many things that are illegal in this country where there's no victim. We've mentioned the war on drugs. I can mention consensual sex work. Any other behavior where you're not hurting another person should be absolutely legal. And we throw so many people in jail for this. And it creates trauma. When you take somebody who's an addict and you remove them, you arrest them, you throw them in jail, you traumatize them throughout that process. You don't give them any help. Then they get back on the street. What's the first thing they do? They go to alleviate that trauma with the drugs. This creates a cycle that is ruining so many communities in this country, particularly communities of color and those who don't have the means to fight back when the government tries to take them down. And so I support changing the entire way we think about criminal justice from every step of the way. Starting when you talk to a police officer, you should have no qualified immunity for police, because if you're done wrong, you should get your day in court. Officers.
You know what? Chase is all right with me. At least on this particular issue, Chase is all right with me. So this is one issue where I do agree with libertarians on is criminal justice. So like this is all right. And you guys notice something? A lot of these candidates, they're more similar than they are different. Because so far, in reference to the issues, they tend to agree with how to handle these issues so far. It's interesting.
Should be required to carry liability insurance. So when they do wrong and there's a settlement against them, that comes out of their insurance policy, not out of the other taxpayer-funded systems in a local government. We need to do things like ending the death penalty, ending mandatory minimums, ending private prisons. I'm a libertarian. I don't believe the government should do a lot, but one of those things should be criminal justice. And I want to remove the profit motive for having people shoved into beds for prisons. So I oppose private prisons. And from every step of the way, through even release and probation and the kinds of abuses and the fact that people are paying hundreds of dollars a month to be monitored by the state when really they probably shouldn't have even been arrested in the first place. I absolutely want to change this. But no, we're not in a crime wave. We're in a media-generated fear wave. That's what the two parties want you to be. They want you to be afraid when you go to the ballot box, because when you're scared, it's easier to control you. I don't want to be afraid of people. I trust that most people are good people, and that if given the chance, they'd be able to live their lives in peace without the interference of government. And so, yeah, remove the over-criminalization of our society, end qualified immunity, and get ourselves back to a truly just justice system that treats people equal in the court of law and doesn't give government a hand up.
Thanks, Chase. We're going to.
Now, this is a libertarian, and I would say that the socialist candidates and the Green Party candidates would agree with him in reference to the criminal justice positions that he just made.
Work our way across on this one. So, Jasmine?
My platform abolishes police and prisons. We switch to a home type system where you have someone at a home, because my platform also gives everybody guaranteed housing. When it comes to preserving police and prisons, we think that it's time to stop dehumanizing Americans. Anyone who has questions about my policy can read it at jasminesherman.com or have it read to them. However,
pause. Everybody notice how she remembers to shout out her website? She's the only one that's doing that. Have you guys noticed? She's the only one every time she's mentioning her website. That's a smart idea.
It is time to switch to a house arrest system with a community task force. Defunding and abolishing the police is our first step. There's no reason for a stranger who doesn't live in your zip code to be patrolling your neighborhoods. It makes more sense for us to start community task force and pay the individual within the community to watch their own neighborhoods, to watch their own children. And that helps to stimulate the economy and create jobs and keeps people at home where they want to be.
Thank you. Jill?
Indeed, we are indeed an criminalizing society. The vast majority of people who are incarcerated have done no violent crime. The majority is there for nonviolent drug crimes. And, this just creates all sorts of knockoff problems. For the cost of incarcerating someone, we could be providing them with a college education and ensuring that they have a positive role and skills to be contributing members of society. In addition to our extremely oppressive and criminalizing drug laws, we should also be addressing the basically poverty and the causes of impoverishment and the desperation that drives petty crime. But whenever mentioning petty crime, one should be mindful that petty crimes are so small compared to corporate crime and the routine ripoff of the public interest by Wall Street and large billionaires. Who also received enormous subsidies from the public by way of tax breaks. The corporate contribution to our taxes, in fact, used to be about 6% of GDP. After the Second World War, it's now 1% of GDP. So in giving away the store to the most fortunate, those who are essentially rolling in profit, we have essentially de-invested in our communities, in our schools, in healthcare, and so on, and created a desperate environment that often leaves people little choice other than a criminal enterprise, particularly drug sales. So,
yes. So this was a good thing that she called out here was the billionaires again and corporate crime, right? Corporate crime is actually is a lot more serious, but it doesn't get as much coverage instead of focusing on crime that people have of desperation.
By legalizing drugs and providing for strong communities, we can essentially massively reduce the incarceration, and people should also be pardoned and released from jail where drugs are being now legalized. Thank you.
We need to understand the very basis, the very foundation of the criminal justice system in this country, of the incarceration system of this country, and it's based precisely on private property, and it's based precisely on the control and the surveillance of people. There was no abolition of slavery in this country. There was the differentiation of the transference of methodology. People in prison still do cheap labor for this country. We need to abolish the prison industrial complex that has a profit motive. We need to be able to understand security in our communities as housing, as employment, as healthcare, as education. Those are the things that we need. And we need to also understand that the majority of crimes, as Jill mentioned, the majority of crimes are crimes of survival. People trying to make ends meet in this country. And so we need to be clear that when we're talking about mass incarceration, it does not protect society. When we're talking about policing and the increase in budgets that happens every year, so the police departments all across the country does not provide security. It provides violence and brutality in our communities. 2023, we saw the record highs of police brutalities in our community. And so we need to be able to understand the very roots to deal with the problem and not just the symptom. If we want to be able to abolish prisons, we need to abolish capitalism. If we want to abolish policing, we need to abolish capitalism, and we need to provide a society, create a society that is able to provide us with all our basic and human rights so that we have a reduction in crime. Because guess what? Sociologists talk about that. Where there is less need for people to cover their needs, there is less crimes. And so we want less crimes. We want to be able to provide for our people.
Thank you, Claudia.
Again, notice how Claudia got to the root cause of the problem.
Lars?
Thank you. Clearly, the criminal justice system is rigged. We see this in the upper echelons of our government right now, where Congress people and upper elites are able to get away with things that normal people would never get away with, that we would all find ourselves in prison with, yet somehow there's multi-tiers of justice based on who you know and how much money you have. We need to level the playing field. And some of the ways that we can level the playing field and unrig the system is we can end qualified immunity so that police cannot hide behind their badge, that if they do something that is bad, they get held accountable. We have to get rid of the profit motive for them, and we can do this by ending civil asset forfeiture, which allows...
Pause, and I'm gonna come back to that because that's an important piece right there. Steve, thank you for joining. This is the third party / independent candidate debate. Apparently this happened last night. So I'm just featuring part of this on the show tonight. All right, let me get back to this the civil asset forfeiture part because that's important.
Less crimes. And so we want less crimes. We want to be able to provide for our people.
Thank you, Claudia.
We need to level the playing field. And some of the ways that we can level the playing field and unrig the system is we can end qualified immunity so that police cannot hide behind their badge, that if they do something that is bad, they get held accountable. We have to get rid of the profit motive for them, and we can do this by ending civil asset forfeiture, which allows for police to basically take from people without really due process and take their possessions. And that's how they can oftentimes fund their own departments. And this puts money in their pockets, and it's clearly a rigged system.
There it is. There it is. I think he's the only person that mentioned that. That is very important. Again, that's one of the libertarian candidates.
Obviously I talked about the ending the failed war on drugs. I think that puts a lot of people in prison that don't need to be there. And to Claudia's point, desperate people do desperate things. And there's a lot of people in America that are suffering financially and economically due to the way that our government system is run. So we need to lift those people up. We need to improve our economy for all people. I grew up really poor with an outhouse and no electricity, and I was able to live the American dream and go on to found a very large and successful company. I want all Americans to be able to get to that level of success. I want all Americans to be lifted up and have a standard of living that we can all be proud of. We used to have that before, and I call for an end to the Federal Reserve because I believe that the Federal Reserve is one of the key institutions that is creating wealth inequality and income inequality in America by stealing money from regular folks and handing it to the banking cartel, and that goes to the corporations. By the time it trickles down to the rest of us, we get a few pennies on the dollar. We need to embrace our economy, lift it up, embrace my energy race, and really get this economy going, abolish the IRS. We can get the economy going and lift everybody up, and there'll be a lot less crime.
There it is. There it is. He took it home. He took it home in the Federal Reserve. You would never hear this on mainstream media. You would never hear this on mainstream media debate. This is the kind of things, this is the type of discussions we need to have. This is what we need to hear and what we need to listen to. So far, this debate has been better than the other debates that I've seen on mainstream media because they're talking about real solutions and they're mentioning things that you'll never be able to hear people say on mainstream media. There it is. And we'll do one more question.
Thank you, Lars. Does anybody want to offer a rebuttal to something that was said by another? Yes, Claudia?
I don't want to rebuttal, but I do want to take the time to mention the political prisoners that have been imprisoned by the capitalist system because they have done things for the right, for the right of people, for Black liberation, for Indigenous liberation. We have folks that cannot have full lives like Edward Snowden and Julian Assange because the United States of America refuses to understand that not everything that is legal is legitimate. Not everything that is legal is right. And that we have the right to create the level of society that allows us to live in dignity. And this is what these political prisoners have done. Mumia Abu-Jamal, Leonard Peltier, the Black liberation movement, freedom fighters that after coming out of being kidnapped by the state have failed health system and die. The United States government, Republicans, Democrats, the ruling class of this country are killing our people and they are caging them. We need to stop that.
Okay.
I just wanted to speak to a couple of the comments that have been made here, particularly about corporate control of our law enforcement. I am from Atlanta. I'm part of the Stop Cop City movement in Atlanta. And, they try to slander us by saying we're from out-of-towners. But the truth is the people who are out of town are the corporate funders, the Atlanta Police Foundation that are getting Cop City built right now. And so it's important for people to unite together across the political spectrum, across left and right. It's not a left versus right issue, it's a right versus wrong issue. And when we talk about the 13th Amendment and the fact that we have legalized, constitutionalized slavery in this country, I read a story yesterday about a young man who worked for 136 hours and sent his prison money that he worked 136 hours to the people of Gaza for relief. How much money did he get sent? Under $18 because he was paid 1.3 cents an hour for his labor. We do have slave labor in this country. If you live in Louisiana, your governor's mansion is being cleaned, vacuumed, and the toilets being scrubbed by prison labor. And so it's important for us to speak up. The government is abusing people, and corporations, large corporate interests, are the people who are invested in making sure that we are subjugated by our government, and we should oppose it at every level.
This is based as hell. I'm telling you guys, this is based. Everybody up there, they're killing it. They're killing it. You don't hear this kind of debate from Kamala Harris. You don't hear this from Joe Biden. You don't hear this from Donald Trump. You don't hear this discussion. They are killing it. We'll do one more.
Claudia raised her hand slightly before you, Jill, but we'll get to you. No. Jasmine. Sorry, Jasmine.
Oh.
Yeah, you're next, actually.
Thank you very much. I just wanted America to know my platform is the only one that ends prisons and lets everybody out of jail and then keeps people from going to jail. That's it. I'm done.
On to you.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add on the subject of Cop City that what we're seeing in Cop City is actually the criminalization of political beliefs, the criminalization of community resistance to the destruction of its rare environmental recreation space, which is being systematically destroyed in order to further criminalize militarize the police department. So, this is exactly what's wrong. And it is essentially criminalizing people who are now charged with terrorism charges, essentially for attempting to protect their open space and their forest, and who've now been subject to RICO charges and who are at risk for enormous criminal penalties and long-term jail sentences. And unfortunately, this is not the only example of it. This is a growing trend, really, of political repression that goes hand in hand with the growing hammer of censorship, and which is part of just this very oppressive political environment that we are now fighting, which is bipartisan and which really demands our resistance and our unified opposition.
All right, I think I wanted to do one more question. Yeah, it should be this one.
All right, moving on. I just want to make a quick note. We won't be able to get to all the public questions, so we're going to encourage our candidates and invite you all to join us on Twitter after the debate, or X, I should say. The handle is @FreeAndEqual to maybe answer some more questions. Moving on here, our question from the public is, how will you ensure that tribal nations are adequately protected beyond recognizing broken tribal treaties and land acknowledgements? What will you do to address the severe systemic inequality on indigenous reservations across the United States? What steps would you take in returning land back to indigenous nations? And how would you reinforce indigenous sovereignty and self-determination? We are going to start with Claudia.
I think that the United States ruling class has a historic debt with the indigenous people of this country. Reparations are the call. We need to be able to provide reparations not only to the indigenous people of this country, but also to the Black Americans. Because
let me pause here for a second. You know what was interesting when I heard this question? And not trying to hate or anything, but I felt like, why didn't they do, it's interesting that the indigenous question was able to, slide in. But to Claudia's point where she brought up, obviously descendants of slavery, where I guess I don't understand why these two weren't worded together. Descendants of slavery and the indigenous people in the US. I was just kind of surprised by that. But Claudia brought it up, which I think is great.
This country was founded on the genocide and the displacement of indigenous people, but it was also on the backs of enslaved Africans that were brought here to
Right.
build this country. And so we have a historic debt with indigenous people and Black Americans. We believe that it is important to restore the treaties that have been broken over and over and over again. And we have to level the playing, which means that we need to work to rebuild those communities. The levels of suicide, of substance abuse are in the hands of the many administrations that have come through. Again, the ruling class that extracts and steals the land from these communities. And so when we're talking about a socialist solution, we're talking about understanding and assuming the historic responsibility that we have with those communities. Land that belongs to the indigenous communities should be given back. Being able to provide the resources necessary for the indigenous community is an immediate call. And being able, again, to level the playing field and provide for those communities that have been brutally and violently placed in the conditions of poverty that they are right now. I still have 20 seconds, but okay, you can have it.
Do you want to continue?
So yeah, to Claudia's credit, notice how she made the connection. Notice how she made the connection. If we're going to talk about land back, we're going to talk about, tribal nations, etc. We also need to talk about the debt that's owed to descendants of slavery in this country. Notice how that wasn't a part of the question that she was asked, but notice how she put it in. Pay attention to things like that.
That's good.
Okay, Jill, we're going to move on to you.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Those broken treaties need to be restored. Land back, particularly large open space areas and forests and natural regions and rivers that are traditionally part of indigenous territories, which were stolen from them. They should be managed by indigenous people. No one would do it better. Case in point, indigenous lands are classic for being subject to extraction and destruction and enormous pollution. In Standing Rock, for example, in North Dakota, the pipeline going through Standing Rock put at risk the entire Mississippi River and the drinking water for something like 20 million people. And the same is true now with the Mountain Valley Pipeline, in fact. These are all invading indigenous territories, and it's the indigenous nations who are really leading the fight, not only to protect their sovereignty, not only to protect their land, but really to essentially provide stewardship for us all in fighting to keep the air clean and the water clean. They are basically fighting for us all, and they have the traditional and indigenous wisdom to know the absolute critical nature of these resources. One of the activists that we have worked with the Green Party in South Dakota made the comment the other day that the U.S. and Western culture measures wealth in terms of how much you have. But among indigenous cultures, your wealth is measured by how much you give away. And that's really consistent with their understanding of the invaluable nature of our resources. And in particular, their sovereignty must be respected before their natural resources are exploited in any way whatsoever.
Thank you. Thank you.
Guys, be sure to after I'm done, Eric, we'll put the link in the chat. Please be sure to share this with other people, because apparently this received over 93,000 views on Rumble, but only a little over 3,000 on YouTube. So we'll put the link in the chat so you can share this with other people.
Lars, we'll move on to you next.
Okay, thank you very much. The government has broken many promises to all kinds of people over the years. I'm reminded of a mule and an acre of land after the Civil War was done. I'm sorry, so I got to correct him here on this one. It's 40 acres and a mule. So I just wanted to add that in there. Reminded about how the government placed the Native Americans into Oklahoma and into various states there. And then when they found resources in those areas, they decided that that was no longer their land and that they would move them off to some other land. And we continue with this practice today with eminent domain laws, where the government seizes people's property for the common good, as it were. And what they do is they displace these people that have worked hard for their land, that have put sweat and tears into their land, and take that and give it to the private sector or to the government. And I believe that this policy is a continuation of this. And so for Native Americans, there's been a great disservice. For Black Americans, there's been a great disservice over and over again. And the government hasn't changed its ways. So in order to fix this, we have to at least stop the government from behaving the way that it does, and stop infringing on people's rights, and stop taking their land. This is something that just goes on over and over again. We have to respect the treaties that we have put in place. And where there has been damage that can be shown, it should be rectified through the court system. And look, the thing is that Native Americans have been given a bad lot. African Americans have been given a bad lot, and they are suppressed economically because our government stole their lands, stole their ability to have a good economic prosperity. And so we need to lift up all these people by helping our economy grow so that it lifts all people up. And I have several plans to do that. You can find it on lars24.com.
Awesome. Thanks, Lars.
Let me just pause here for just a second here. Because there was a comment I did. Oh, I hope I didn't lose it. This one. New York Varsity says, so if I'm half Black and white, do I get half reparations? So reparations isn't based on race. It would have to be based on lineage, at least for descendants of slavery. If you base reparations on race, according to what I read from Dr. Darity, if you base reparations on race, it can actually be overturned by the 14th Amendment. So it has to be based on lineage. So if you have direct lineage going back towards the descendants, towards slavery, then you would still get reparations. There wouldn't be no half reparation. I never heard of that. No half reparations, but obviously you would still get reparations. But it's very clear. I have to be very clear about that. It's not based on race. It has to be based on lineage. I cannot say that enough. Here we go.
Chase, on to you next.
So when we're talking about the issue of tribal sovereignty, you're right. The baseline is to start respecting the treaties that have been made over the years that have been continuously broken over and over by the United States government. When a wrong is done, you do have to rectify that through some sort of recompense. I do believe that can come in the form of land. And in fact, we have a lot of federal land that used to be tribal sovereign land that we could return back to them for the wrongs we have done to the community. I think there's a completely legal way, a framework to get that done. But what I want to talk about is the fact that from the smallpox blankets onward, we as in the Western world have been treating indigenous people like crap. Let's be real. And you see this in communities all over the country that have suffered due to poverty, substance abuse, and all kinds of things. And this all relates back to the original sin of the treatment of indigenous people. So I would seek to respect tribal sovereignty 100%. As Jill mentioned, I don't want people putting a pipeline on tribal land unless the tribe wants it there and they have determination over that land. And if they are going to be selling that land, it should be paid to the tribe. It shouldn't be taken away from them by eminent domain and other processes. But it starts with respecting the fact that tribal sovereignty should be absolute. It should be their land. And frankly, I support the right of tribal people. If they want to secede from the government of the United States, they should have every single right to do it. And we should not stop them one bit. Absolutely.
Jasmine, go ahead.
In America, police solve less than 4% of crime. But if they did solve a crime, let's say you bought a stolen car, they would make you give the stolen property you purchased back. We need to give land back. My platform provides people with guaranteed housing because we give the land back. That means no rent, no mortgage. We can't just say, we're gonna give indigenous people sovereignty and then not. We're not gonna just say, we're gonna give indigenous people their federal lands. They need more than that. They want all of their stolen property back. That does not mean it evicts people from their homes. What it does is it allows you to remain in your home and they have stewardship over the land. What that means is you would get all the money you spent on purchasing your home back and still be able to remain in your domicile. What this also means is we end the occupation of Hawaii, the occupation of Guam. We also give Puerto Rico their land back. We have to act like we really do apologize. And we can't do that by giving somebody a piece of something. If you came to my house and you took anything, I would want everything you took back. It wouldn't be a polite conversation about what is mine that you took. The same situation where we're seeing in Palestine, where Israel has invaded and occupied their land, is the same thing that we did to indigenous people right here. So I'm not going to pretend, and my VP, Tanda Bluebear, and I have been working with indigenous tribes around the country to write a land back policy with their voice in part. If you are indigenous and you would like to participate in writing that land back policy, go to JasmineSherman.com. Your voice matters. This is yours, and we want to give it back. For Americans who are only worried about themselves, we're not kicking you out. You will have housing, you will have healthcare, and you will have education. You won't have rent anymore, and you won't have mortgages.
Notice how Jasmine made the connection to Gaza and the West Bank in reference to land back. Notice how, again, she explained to you exactly what her policy and her platform is and how she would do it. This is incredibly important because, again, like I said, I've interviewed a lot of candidates over the years. And it's very telling to me if I'm interviewing someone and I ask them, what would you do if you were president? What would you do in that situation? And they don't really tell me what they would do. They just explain the problem. That tells me you don't really have a plan or you haven't memorized that plan. But I think what she said there is very important. You can't just half apologize to people. And that's what's been happening in this country. And it's happened in other Western countries as well. And making that connection back to the Palestinian people, that is very important.
We can do things differently if we stopped funding Israel, where we pay rent and healthcare and education for them.
Thank you, Jasmine.
Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. But if you have, when you get a chance, watch the full debate. Eric, can you put the link to the video in the chat just so people can watch that on their own time? And I'll go to comments here because you guys need to watch the full thing. I couldn't play the full thing or here. We'd be here forever. But that's probably one of the best debates I've seen. Real issues, real policies, and notice like there's a lot of overlap in reference to some of the issues. 2 libertarians, right? 2 socialists. And 2 Greens, but Jasmine is a socialist. Claudia is a socialist. And then you have Jill as well. So it's like there was overlap in reference to how to get some of these things done. These are the discussions that the ruling class doesn't want us to have. These are the discussions that the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, they don't really want us to have. They don't want people to see this. They don't want people to see this debate. They don't want them to realize that some of these different political ideologies and different political parties actually do have overlap when it comes to certain issues. So this debate is incredibly important.